This week on Supercars Torque, it looks like Shane van Gisbergen was about to have the same failure on his 888 Camaro at Bathurst. The 2024 calendar is taking shape and the Mustangs get some new wings for the Gold Coast. The big news this week is that Elly Morrow is calling time on her Super 2 career at the end of this season. For you guys who haven't really been following Super 2, Elly did, I think it was Super 3 a couple of years ago, and then she was with Brad Jones Racing for Super 2 last year, and she moved up to Tickford Racing for Super 2 this year. The results haven't been brilliant. She's currently sitting 14th in the standings. But having said that, her friend of the show, Brad Vaughan, who's her teammate this year, he's only sitting 9th. Granted, we've seen a lot more speed out of Brad, and he's been a little bit unlucky in his maiden Super 2 championship run, but yeah, it's not like the Tickford cars have been super fast this year and she's doing a super bad job or anything, but yeah, 14th in Super 2, considering also, you know, Brad has had a few DNFs in there as well. It's not a brilliant run for her, but it is a bit sad in that it's another, you know, promising young female that will again be lost to the sport pretty much. Looks like she's going to go in to kind of driver training and things like that, trying to bring up the next generation of female racers. But yeah, I can understand why they're pulling the pin. She's had a few years at it, and the results aren't quite there. I think they'd set a deadline of wanting to be 10th in the championship this year, which isn't going to happen, or within the top 10 of the championship. It's not looking like it's going to happen, so they're calling time on her career. According to reports from Andrew Edwards this week, it looks like Shane van Gisbergen's Camaro was going to have a very similar failure to the other two 888 Camaros at Bathurst there, with the gear tower cracking, and yeah, just some intervention where apparently Jamie had, the guys were reluctant to tell Shane that there was issues with the other two cars. Jamie had said no, he needs to know because, you know, he can back it off and take it a little bit easier, put a little less stress on the equipment. So they came over the radio and told Shane, and apparently it was, well, they're saying seconds away from failure. I'd imagine it was probably further away, but they could see that it was going the same way as the others, and potentially that information that got through to Shane before the end of the race, that could have prevented a similar failure on his car. There's a few, I need my tinfoil hat, there's a few theories going around that probably because Shane's was that third wildcard car and it had done less Ks than the other two, that is why it didn't have the failure. But there is, which I'm a little bit confused at where they were at, but apparently there was kind of version 1 of the gear tower that they started the year with, and then we saw Tim Slade and Thomas Randall have issues with theirs early on, and I think a couple of teams cracked them during testing, and then they kind of moved on to version 2 after testing, and then they had those failures with Slade and Randall, and then we're on to kind of version 3 of it, but there's a bit of confusion whether the 888 cars have got what version in them. So yeah, there's the whole story seemed a little bit strange, but yeah, I don't think it was the fact that that was the newest car and that's why that didn't have a failure, where the other two older cars, obviously because Feeney's has been running all year, so you would have thought that would have cracked first rather than Shane's old car that did sit out a few rounds, you know, after Shane took over the wildcard car. But yeah, there's obviously an issue there that needs to be looked at. Yeah, just glad it was only the two 888 cars and not a full field of them going wrong at Bathurst. It's looking increasingly likely the Mustangs will get their parity change for the Gold Coast. Still not sure how this whole system works, but apparently the trigger system was triggered at Bathurst because the race laps were slower or whatever. Apparently you need to be slower in 5 of the last 8 events, or 5 events straight. You need to be slower for it to be triggered. But what I don't get is that they had the Parity review in Townsville, so we haven't had enough events since then for them, you know, to assess whether this change worked or not. According to the results, it didn't work. So yeah, if they get this change and they don't go out and win at the Gold Coast, did it work? Yeah, and chances are Gold Coast isn't a heavily aerodynamic circuit, so how much will we see? The other problem is you are chopping and changing a car once again, where the Camaro guys have had all year with the same or relatively same setup. Apparently the changes, Barry Ryan was saying, it looks like they want to take a kilo of drag off the car and move a tiny bit of downforce from the front to the rear of the car. So they'll still have the same overall downforce. There'll be a little bit less drag and just shifting where the downforce is. He came out and said at Bathurst, just let them have the changes. We're gonna go and beat them anyway, which, you know, one of the Erebus cars beat everyone but one of the Triple Eight cars. So that's my big... I know the Parity thing's very hard and it's very hard to judge from the seat here. Bathurst, yes, it was a big gap at the end of the day, but also we had, realistically in this day and age, we had unprecedented amount of time running green, so you would expect a big gap between the cars, especially some of the guys would have kind of been cruising around thinking, okay, well, I'll sit in, you know, third or fourth position here, let's just wait for that late race safety car that never came. But anyway, there will be the changes at the Gold Coast, so everything will be fine and dandy. No need to get our tinfoil hats on, and yeah, Supercars isn't favouring Chev and all of that kind of... Oh wait, there's still going to be all of that talk regardless of what happens results wise. So yeah, it'll blow up all again in the Gold Coast because somebody's favourite driver won't win, so it's all got to do with Parity. Now, the calendar. Alright, so there's still whether Newcastle happens or not next year. That's the big question. So if it doesn't happen, apparently now they're talking about having a 10-day festival of Bathurst where you have the 12-hour one weekend and it continues on to the Supercars 500 race the weekend after, which it will be two 250k races on the Saturday and Sunday. So the issue we have here is that the New South Wales government has a contract with Supercars that the opening round has to be in New South Wales. So if it's not at Newcastle, Bathurst tick against that. Bathurst only has a license to run track events for 5 events a year, and this is a creative way of getting around that because there's currently 5 events booked in for next year. If the event goes for 2 weekends, but it's one event of, you know, epic proportions, it's fine. The sprint weekends at Bathurst have always fallen very flat. The ones back in 95, 96, they were flat. The one we had 2021 where we opened the season there because of reasons, yeah, they just seem flat. Like Bathurst needs to be a big endurance race. The sprints kind of don't work there. If we can't go to Newcastle, what I would prefer to see on the calendar is a big bang at Sydney Motorsport Park, a proper Saturday night race where we go, and maybe even like a one-day event there where we have a big opening, like a 300-kilometre Saturday night race to open the championship. Maybe even start it kind of, you know, later on in the day, and it runs, you know, dusk into evening where the place is lit up. You have your fireworks and that when the guy crosses the line first. He's the championship leader after the first round and all of that kind of stuff. Make it really spectacular there. And then there's obviously an SMP size hole somewhere in the calendar. We'll go to Queensland Raceway or Winton for that round, or we do both. That keeps, if we do one of those to replace that kind of missing SMP round in the middle of the year, still keeps calendar at 13. If we do both, do both. We get 14 events during the year. While you're at it, may as well add back Phillip Island as well and have 15. That's probably pushing a little bit too far away, but I think next year, if the Newcastle doesn't happen, I quite like the idea of shuffling in an SMP for the first round, and then we have Winton or Queensland Raceway. So at least we are building the amount of rounds, and then say the next year we add in Singapore and the other alternate of Queensland Raceway or Winton to bring us, you know, up to 14, 15 rounds. So that's my thoughts. Down in the comments, I'd love to hear your feedback on what you'd prefer to see the calendar if Newcastle doesn't happen. Keep in mind that we have to start in New South Wales, so it does really limit the amount of tracks that are available. So would you prefer to see an extra Bathurst, like a sprint round there, or would you, that is kind of tacked on with the 12-hour, which, I mean, that's a big event if people want to go to, but it would be, I suppose, hard to try and get leave and all of that at that point of the year, but you know, it could happen. Or do you like my idea of the big kind of night event at Sydney Motorsport Park? I mean, could be good there, could get a lot of fans because it's at a good time of year where it's nice and warm there. So, you know, a night event could be good, and that big kind of bang one day, get it all over and done with, fireworks and everything, looks quite spectacular on the TV. But anyway, let me know. Until next time, I'm still Dave, and I'll catch you later.